You are now tuned in to the Triple Threat Podcast.
Alrighty, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Triple Threat Podcast. We are so excited to bring you just the latest and greatest in the world of sports. But specifically, this week, Jordan and I will talk about the NBA and even more specifically, our favorite team, your favorite team, America's team, the Philadelphia 76ers, who basically are the, I don't want to say the soap opera or the reality TV series of the NBA, but it seems, Jordan, that when there's something to talk about in regards to drama, the Philadelphia 76ers are right in the middle of it. And by the way, Jordan Triplett, my partner in crime, welcome back to another show.
Hello, everybody. Are you ready for the second half of this season? It's about to heat up. And like you said, the Sixers definitely a soap opera. But I mean, what's new there? They do this every year. One year it's Fultz. One year it's Embiid shushing the crowd. One year it's the Ben Simmons jump shot, and it still is, and what isn't going on with this team?
Well, it all started with the process, as you know, and you know how, I mean, personally, as a Sixers fan, I didn't mind the process. I thought it was the right thing to do, because if you're going to make it beyond that glass ceiling that they were at the time, they were constantly finishing, you know, 5th, 6th, or 7th, or 8th in the playoff rankings, not getting anywhere. And so, you know, Sam Hinkie at the time saw that the only way to really break through that was to get two superstar players, two transcendent players that you could get only through the draft, really, because free agents weren't going to places like Philadelphia. They were only going to select places, you know, like the Lakers, you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, the plan was just to basically tank and make sure that the process went accordingly. And I thought the process worked. You know, we have Joel Embiid and we have Ben Simmons, and you can add around that. Now, what they've done since then, you can look at it as a joke. You can look at it as bad management with Jerry Colangelo and, you know, the whole tweeting thing with his wife, and, you know, just story after story. You mentioned Markelle Fultz and Ben Simmons and all the rookies who get hurt the first year, and, you know, the rookie curse with the 76ers. And, you know, most recently, Joel Embiid with shushing the crowd and, you know, trolling the fans about, you know, basically saying he was going to leave because you're running me out of town. And, you know, as a fan, those things get tiring. And you just want the Sixers to really just concentrate on the business at hand, which is just playing basketball and getting them to where they know they can be if they played more consistently. That's the maddening thing for me as a fan, is just watching this team sometimes go through the motions, especially on the road, and then showing how dominant they can be at home. And it's just the Jekyll and Hyde, the bipolar nature of this team is just so frustrating.
I absolutely agree. It's hard to watch this team on the road. The biggest story is Sixers' best record in the league at home, 25-2, on the road, 9-19, and a lot of those 19s and even some of those 9s, they just jog up the court, or they let the worst offense in the league put up like 140 points that night just because they don't want to close out, or they don't want to protect the ball, or they don't want to play physical at all. They seem to get punked around by teams like the Magic and the Suns because they hit big time shots and they're ready for the game and they're ready for the challenge. And the Sixers is like, oh, I know we can beat anybody in a 7-game series. Like, look what happened to Kyrie last year when he said that. You can't just bank on flipping the switch, and that's where a lot of the frustration comes, because to flip the switch, to say something like that, you have to win first. And not only do you have to win first, you have to show that you can consistently come out and dominate and enforce your will when you want to. And this team just doesn't do that, but they expect that they could just flip that switch and turn into the top 4 team that we thought they were coming into the season.
Absolutely. You have to prove it. You have to show that you have the capability to flip that switch. And, you know, teams don't get that benefit of the doubt until they do it at least once. You know, you can talk about the Golden State Warriors, who earned their right to do that. or even LeBron James's Cavaliers, who earned that right in the Eastern Conference to do it, where they may have hit bumps in the road late in the year, or within series themselves, where they may be falling behind inferior teams, and go to 7 games with teams that were inferior, and they'd be like, "Hey, listen, what are we doing? Let's just flip the switch and let's get this over with." And they would do that, but this team hasn't shown it. Number one. And number two, we don't know if, mentally, personality-wise, that they are really built for that. They think they are, but, there's a lot to be said about actually getting something done instead of so much talk about, well, we know we can beat any team in the league. Just look at how we've beaten so-and-so teams, but they've all been at home. None of them have been on the road that I can remember. They haven't had a signature road win, probably, since maybe they beat the Golden State Warriors last season. I just can't remember one this year. So that's the current state of the team, the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the team. They're 34-21, 25-2 at home, and 9-19 on the road. And what we're looking for going into this All-Star break, Jordan, is something different, something new. Now, they've added 2 new players, 2 new perimeter threats, and Glenn Robinson III and Alec Burks. I think they can help this team tremendously. What are your thoughts?
I honestly do think it has a lot to do with freeing up the rotations, and I think that is the key to seeing this team at its best moments, because we do have plenty of numbers that back up certain trends, like when Horford's off the court and Embiid and Simmons are on, they have a net rating of, I believe, 7.8, which would be second behind the Milwaukee Bucks, who are setting record-setting numbers in terms of their net rating and all kinds of advanced analytics and everything like that. And just having those wings fill in roles that we have desperately needed, like Alec Burks being a ball handler off the pick and roll, which this team is trying to run more, and also him just being a shooter while being able to do that pick and roll and be a defender is a plus over having someone like Trey Burke, who could do everything on offense, but on defense, the eye test and the numbers prove that he's not the best on that end. And same thing with Robinson, a 3-and-D prototypical kind of guy. He's not obviously the very best at it, but for a guy shooting 40% from 3 and able to play serviceable enough defense on the other end is just a luxury that this team has desperately needed in order to allow our better lineups, like the Simmons plus Embiid with no Horford, or Simmons plus Horford with no Embiid, or Simmons by himself with a bunch of shooters. Those lineups there, and Embiid by himself with ball handlers and shooters, those lineups are the key to seeing this team at its best, rather than the starting lineup that we've been trying to roll out.
Well, you mentioned a lot of different lineup combinations there, and I think that's exactly where this team is. And Brett Brown has the task of figuring out the very best combinations to put this team in the best positions for victory, no matter where they play. You mentioned Glenn Robinson and what he can bring to the table, 40% three-point shooter. One of the intangibles about Glenn Robinson III that many people don't know or realize or haven't really talked about is that, he's an athlete. And he can finish plays and he can run. We saw it, in his first game with the Sixers where he made a lot of plays around the basket. His cutting ability was on display. He didn't know the playbook, obviously, after only being there maybe 36 hours. They just put him out there and said, hey, just basically go with the flow and, make yourself available and make plays. He scored 10 quick points in that game. And to me, that just kind of shows, what he can bring to the table, from an intangible standpoint, in terms of not just being a three-point specialist, but really elevating the team, elevating the bench, and elevating the bench's production that hasn't necessarily been there with guys like James Ennis or Trey Burke that you mentioned earlier. But let's go back and talk about Al Horford and the problems that he's had this year. And I'll just lay it out there. I don't think I'll get much blowback from this, but Al Horford has been dreadful this season for the Sixers. Not necessarily his fault. There are fit problems, but dreadful from the standpoint of when you are put in position to do what you've been asked to do, you can't miss open jumpers continually every single game. you can't get bullied or boxed out by guys your size or centers around the league and not be a presence on the boards. He's just been a nightmare so far for this team, and hopefully coming off the bench, that can be the key to getting him in better positions for success that you alluded to before just now.
Yeah, and Horford, he, like you said, has not looked good in the majority of his minutes. The minutes he has looked good is when he is at the 5. But when I see stuff like that, I think back to the offseason where many reports came out like, oh, Al Horford picked Philadelphia. One of the reasons is because he was able to play the 4 again and not have to bang down low with the bruisers. But like that doesn't mean don't be the physical force that you are when you're at your best on the court. And like you said, missing those open jumpers, like we all know you were brought here that when you're on the court with Embiid, you're the stretch 4. You're the guy that has to hit the shots, but also be the big guy that can defend other stretch 4s and be a facilitator because you're known for not turning the ball over and having good assist numbers for a big. And he's the silver lining I see with him is that last year we were having the same exact thoughts about Jimmy Butler, like, oh, he's looking sluggish, he's looking washed, maybe the minutes got to him, he's doing too much on this team, XYZ. And then we saw in the playoffs, Jimmy came alive and he was the most energetic guy on the court most times. And I don't think Horford will be the most energetic guy on the court, but I really hope out of all people, he's the one that really can flip that switch and be the Al Horford that we know come playoff time.
Well, he definitely has the history and the pedigree. We've seen it before in the past, so we do have to give him the benefit of the doubt in regards to that, just being able to flip that switch and being ready to play playoff basketball. So that is a good hope to have, and that is one of my hopes as well. And, but maybe going to the bench, well, even though his minutes won't be decreased, I don't think, it's just a better change of pace for this team to see what other combination lineups can do for Brett Brown and the Sixers offense especially. Now, the Sixers, as we know, we're going into the All-Star break this week. Where would you rank the state of the team overall if you gave it a letter grade? I would put the Sixers at probably, I would put them at a B+. They're 13 games over 500. They've got the best home record, but their road record is atrocious. But I'm going to give them a B+, and I guess I'm being kind in that respect because they are the 5 seed, and they're only a game and a half behind Miami for that 4 seed. So to me, they have growing room to get in that A- category. They have the second easiest schedule coming up, for the remainder of the season. So, what do you say? I say B+.
I would say actually B- myself. I mean, it's still a B, but I just know based on what we all expected coming into the year, I did expect them at this point to be at least a top 4 team in the East. Obviously, the resurgence of Toronto and still hanging strong without Kawhi kind of threw a wrench into those plans. But did we really expect to have a worse record than Boston at this point? Do we have to
No.
expect a worse record than the Heat at this point? Because everybody had the Heat penciled in as like a fringe 8, maybe 7 seed. But they've really come alive and shown their mettle as a team. And at the same time, like you said, they're still way above 500, a great home record. And when they do play those top tier teams, they at least look the part. You see the team that we all expected to see, like the Christmas win against Milwaukee. That's the team we all expected to see. Even just a little bit before that game, I would say, to your point before, our last signature road win would be against Boston on December the 12th when they took that 3-0 season series lead and Embiid had 38 and 13. That's the team that we
right, yeah.
figured that we would see. But we just don't see it that often. And thankfully, we saw it the last game against the Clippers. And it was largely because of those staggered lineups where Horford was either by himself. And when he was with Embiid, it was only for 9 minutes of that 48-minute game. But largely, they were separated. And I mean, there's a lot of disappointments But at the same time, we know the Sixers. We know it's always a circus. And we have seen this before where even 2 years ago, when Embiid had that face injury, but they pulled off a long win streak to end the year and jumped into the 3 seed. Before that, we were the 5 seed. We had to catch all the way up after that point. So it's not a place that's unfamiliar for this team. I think the media gets a lot of negative reaction from the Sixers just because they expected this dominant team, and Charles Barkley called us the Browns, like the Cavaliers still don't exist. But it's just that with the team, I think they're where they need to be somewhat, but obviously you want to see a little bit more effort out of them.
Well, I mean, I think I gave them B plus just based off of potential for moving forward this season. And yeah, I just want to go back to expectations before the season started. Obviously, the Miami Heat, a huge surprise in terms of how good they are with the young players they have. And everyone thought that Jimmy Butler just went for the money. And maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he saw something that no one else saw in terms of the potential for that team. And they've been playing outstanding basketball. Bam Adebayo has been playing at an all-star level. And the shooters that Jimmy Butler has around him, with Hero and Robinson, have been phenomenal. So that's been a surprise. Even the Celtics have been a surprise. We figured that, hey, they lost Horford. He's been our Achilles heel. We have him now. Even though on face-to-face, head-to-head, we've dominated the Celtics, winning 3 out of the 4. But no one thought that the Celtics would be as good as they are, being the 3 seed right now. So when you kind of match it all together, again, I think my B plus is based off of potential, because right now they're 34-21, 27 games left after they come back from the All-Star break. You can assume that with the second easiest schedule, that they could go 20-7 out of those next 27 games coming up, which gives them 54 wins for the year. Now, again, we all thought this was a 60-win team, but they've really underachieved that because of the issues with the lineup, because of the fit problems with Horford, because of injuries to Embiid and also to Richardson, who has been a really big plus for the Sixers this year. But all that considered, I think they can easily finish with 54 wins, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's just that it's not 60 wins, so I guess that's why I have them at a B plus. All right. In any event. Looking ahead for the Sixers, what do you think needs to be done? Right now, the Sixers are at the 5 spot, a game and a half behind the Miami Heat for that 4 seed. What do you think needs to happen, Jordan, for the Sixers to move from that 5 seed to a 4 seed, or even maybe that 3 seed?
So I think that the team needs to look at what the Raptors are doing. The Raptors do not have a starting lineup, and that's largely due to injuries, and just they had some newcomers taking some roles, like Chris Boucher, an undrafted guy, and Terrence Davis as well. But they don't have a starting lineup set in stone, because every single game they come out with what's best for them. And what better team has the personnel to do that than the 76ers right now? We have 2 of the best centers in the league on our team right now. If Embiid is the best center, I think he's the best center, because Jokic doesn't get it done at both ends and Cat don't win. But Al Horford, I would still place him in the top 10 of centers I would like on my basketball team right now. And if the other team we're playing runs out 2 bigs, like if we play Milwaukee, obviously the team was built to play against, then obviously you want to run out Horford and Embiid to take on Giannis and Brook Lopez and all their big guys. But if we're playing a team like, I don't know, the Celtics, with Tatum at the 4 and Cantor at the 5, what's the point of running them both out there? Let's have Ben essentially slide to the 4 on defense, still running the offense as the 1, but he slides to the 4 on defense, or Tobias Harris takes that 4 spot on defense. And then we have Thibault or Korkmaz or whoever the situation fits at the time in that starting lineup. If we need more firepower, start Korkmaz. If we need more defense, start Thibault. If we need a mix of both, put out Glenn Robinson III. Just to put the team in the position they need to win. And I think, especially against this, I won't call it a cakewalk schedule because we have lost plenty of those games against these quote unquote cakewalk teams. But for them to have the best chance against those teams, they just need to cater to their needs at the time instead of just being so stubborn about their lineups and rotations. Or that has a lot to do with Brown.
Well, I think you just hit the head on the nail just now. We talking about stubbornness, and then, the question I was going to ask you is Brett Brown? Does he have it in him? Does he have the capability to be that flexible, or to have that kind of foresight with the new roster he has? He's got so much flexibility when the team brought in Robinson and Burks that hopefully he sees it. And it took so long to get Al Horford coming off the bench, and maybe that was designed because he did wait one game prior to the All-Star break. I thought he would wait till afterwards, but I think the timing was even better by doing it a game before, so that there's no shock coming out of the All-Star break with that. But I mean, I have my doubts, and many Sixers fans do as well, if Brett Brown is the man, period, to lead this team to the promised land of at least getting to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I have my doubts as well. For the longest time, I was not a fire Brett Brown person until I guess late last year, this year, because it started last year in the playoffs when we saw Nick Nurse outcoach him and just make overall better adjustments throughout the series, because I do think that Sixers team last year way more talented than that Raptors team, obviously with Kawhi Leonard being one of the best players in the world, but that's just one guy at the end of the day. And I think a lot of that series had to do with what Nick Nurse was doing with his rotations to counter everything that Brown did. Because the biggest change he made that series was putting Harris on Gasol and letting Embiid take Siakam. And that worked for like 2 games. And then the Raptors essentially swung back. And even this year with the rotations, I understand the logic behind keeping that starting lineup, because last year our large problem was we didn't have that continuity. We didn't have the guys familiar with each other's games that well. And Brown wanted them to have those minutes and all those minutes so they can learn each other's games and better coexist as a team. But I think at 50 games, that's a little bit too late. I probably would have stopped at 30, 40 games in. But hey, I'm not the head coach. But Brett Brown is. And I think to make those adjustments is what's going to end up saving him his job or losing his job if he doesn't make those adjustments.
Absolutely. That's what it's all going to boil down to for Brett Brown. And, at the end of the day, if he doesn't make the Eastern Conference Finals, like Elton Brand and the organization promised last year, that he was going to be on the hot seat. And I think it's set in stone this year that that's the expectation, because this team has been designed, it's been molded, it's been expected to make noise in the playoffs and then make that final push once other pieces get added to this team to make it a championship caliber team. So the edict that Brett Brown has to make the Eastern Conference Finals is something that is very real. I just, again, as you said, I doubt that he has it in him, whether it's his philosophy, which is probably the case, coming from the Spurs system where, they believe in their system, and you can't argue with the fact that the system has worked. I just don't know if it works with this lineup, with this set of guys and with these set of personalities, that the Spurs system is something that can be rigid at times, that fits what this team has right now.
I love the parallels to the Spurs organization that they're trying to push. But at the end of the day, I think the comparison stops at the personnel, because Tim Duncan and Joel Embiid, let's say they're the two fulcrum big men in the situation. we don't have a Manu Ginobili. We don't have a Tony Parker. We
Exactly.
have a Ben Simmons. We have a
Exactly.
Tobias Harris. We have Al Horford. I mean, you can't just. We have Josh Richardson. I can't leave him out because he's a very important player to this team. But we just need to do things our way, and I think a lot of the problem was the team trying to be reactive in the sense that we saw, okay, we need to take out the Bucks. Let's double down on getting big, just for them to not focus on smaller teams who give them problems. Like the Celtics focused on a lot of one-on-one isolation and guard play or coming around screens, or teams like even the Hawks, their system gets us every time, with Trae Young dropping 50 points against us every game and 20 assists and hitting everything in the world. And the reactiveness of the front office and the coach, I think, are just not where they need to be. If we're going to react, we need to have lineups, like I said before, that fit our opponent. But if we're just going to try to be the best version of our team, if that's that starting five, then we need to go about things differently with that starting five and what they're doing on the court.
Now you did see a sliver of hope, Jordan, with that last game with the Clippers, where they did recognize that they had to play small ball or match small ball against small ball when they played the Sixers and bench Horford. Now, there are other reasons for that, but it did fit the need to, bring in Korkmaz and Diebold and match up defensively. And even, from an offensive standpoint of just having players out there that were able to stay with the Clippers and stay with their game and play the type of basketball they needed to play. I just wanted to interject that I don't know if it's everything, nothing, or something, but it's at least something to me that they made that adjustment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a great step forward. And around this time of year, Brett Brown does get more focused on his coaching. I would say the best word for it. He gets a lot more. He has his data essentially from the first half of the year, so that in the second half of the year, he can use his sample size to make those adjustments that he needs. And whether you think that's too little, too late, or just right on time, then that's a separate debate. But I do fully believe that we will see a different Sixers team, not only against worse opponents going out in the end of the year, but just a better looking team overall in terms of cohesion. And that's what we really all want to see for this team going into the playoffs.
I absolutely agree. I think there's several reasons for that. I think you're going to see cohesion from a standpoint of, guys realizing that the clock is ticking. Number one, that they really do have to prove that they can flip that switch. Number two, that you have new players coming into the lineup that are exciting and can help them from a strategy standpoint. And from a bench production standpoint, the bench right now, when you add Robinson and Burks, I know I keep harping on this, but when you look at the bench lineup, it's as strong as it's ever been by just by making those two moves. And the other piece is that, you do have an easy schedule, but you kind of got the sense, Jordan, that this team was waiting for the All-Star break. They were kind of laboring to get to that finish line, so to speak. There were times where they did look tired. They did look disinterested. They were mentally fatigued, unless they were playing at home. But they were just kind of waiting for this All-Star break as a measuring stick or a marking point to say, okay, this is where we regroup. This is where we get ready to really mentally focus, and get physically ready for the home stretch.
Like you said, the bench is much, much better. We haven't had wings like the best we've had is Ennis and Mike Scott. And that was last year. And this year, Ennis wasn't doing that well. And Mike Scott, we know he's been terrible. And he's
garbage.
He's just about lost all his minutes. He still gets some out there just because we do need another four out there to back up Tobias. But I mean, they run no plays for him anymore, especially compared to last year. And just having a guy like Glenn Robinson who comes from that Warrior system where he was told to run around and find the open space, he just has a better feel for the game off the ball, and that's how we saw him score those 10 quick points in his first game. Just literally knowing where to be at the right times and just getting open and ready to make plays. And Burks is able to not totally run an offense, but in spurts, he can definitely keep you afloat. And I mean, we couldn't say that about Ennis. Ennis wasn't running the pick and roll with anybody. Mike Scott, all he does is spot up, and not even that well anymore. So yeah, I do think the bench is far better than it's ever been. But like you said, the time is now. These guys have all got to get it together. They've all got to play harder and show the world who they really are. And even back on that home and road record, I personally don't think the Sixers team needs to be a 2 or 3 seed. The most I'm expecting is 3 seed. I think they'll be fine with the 4. If they get that first round at home to just set the tone for the playoffs for them, and likely they would have to play the Miami Heat or the Celtics, depending on how those two end up at the end of the year. To have a home series against one of them would be important to me. But after that point, I mean, it's the playoffs, dude. Like, you got to win the games no matter what. So I think that if you have to play the Bucks in the second round or the Raptors again in the second round, whether we have the home advantage or not, they need to come out ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that sentiment. And let's take a look, Jordan, at their current position and look at some playoff preferences. Now, I think personally that they are going to catch the Miami Heat and finish that 4 seed, and that they will play the Miami Heat, having that 1-game home advantage by winning that 4 seed, having the home court advantage. And it's going to be a tough series, man. Miami is a good team. They're not just a team that is lucky or a team that has had favorable schedule matchups or whatever the case may be. This is a damn good team. And they do present some matchup problems for the 76ers. But I think just by virtue of having that one extra home game would be enough for the Sixers to win a 7-game, hard-fought, hotly contested series against the Miami Heat. Because I don't think they can catch the Celtics. They're 4.5 games behind the Celtics for that 3 seed. Unless the Celtics have a serious injury to a key player, that's a different story. But as it's built now, I just don't think they have the capability with only 27 games left. Not to say that it can't happen. It's not impossible. I'm not saying that, but I just think realistically they're not going to be able to catch the Celtics the way they're playing, being 4.5 games back. So I think it's a 4 seed or bust for the 76ers at this point.
If they get the 4th, I'm perfectly fine with that. As long as I get that one home series, because I mean, after that, no matter what, if you want the ring, you're going to have to play the Bucks, and they're on pace for 70 wins. We cannot even touch that. So even if we win out from here, so obviously there is a road series that you need to win just off the bat there. Sure, it'd be nice to have the second round with a home series there, but that means getting all the way to the 2 seed most likely and taking that from the Raptors, which are 6 games ahead of us, and a lot can happen. I think the Celtics are catchable because they do have a far tougher schedule to go out. They have the 21st out of 30 in terms of strength of, easiest ranking. So they're the 9th hardest schedule left. And I could very well see them dropping just a little bit lower. But at the same time, I'm not expecting them to. They get that 4 seed in my book. They can beat the Heat.
Yeah, and so we're in agreement with that. Now, looking ahead to that second round, Jordan, hypothetically, the Sixers beat the Heat. They would play the Milwaukee Bucks, assuming the Milwaukee Bucks will win their first round series as well. I happen to actually like the matchup better than the Miami Heat. I know it sounds silly, I know it sounds crazy, but I think the Sixers match up better with the Bucks in a second round series than they do having to go on the road for a Game 7 against the Miami Heat in a first round series. So that's why getting that 4 seed is so important for the Sixers to get that first round off their back, to be able to focus on the team that they know they have to beat to get to the NBA Finals. And why not play them in the second round as opposed to the third round? I think it's a better fit for them to be fresher, to be ready. And I think just from a matchup standpoint, they have a favorable matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks, in my opinion, as opposed to the Toronto Raptors, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, this is the team they were built to face. I'd rather take them on sooner or later, because what kind of jolt would that give the team if they win the second round? First of all, they make it out the second round, which is something that has been hanging over this team for a couple years now. Second of all, you beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Who else is gonna step to you? You beat the best team. Then what do you have next? The Raptors and the Celtics, and you're not to discount them, but obviously we all know the Bucks are the best team in the league right now, and we're best equipped to beat them. Take them out early and then go into the conference finals with a hot streak and just getting that monkey off your back of getting out the second round. And who would count out the Sixers after that point?
Absolutely. And, so many things can happen, Jordan, as we, begin to look at the second half or really the second quarter of the NBA season. The All-Star game seems to be getting pushed back further and further each year. But, this is a time to turn it on, so to speak, to show what you really have and to really get super focused on the task at hand for the Sixers team and what they are capable of doing. We'll just have to wait and see. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Triple Threat Podcast. Ken Triplett, along with Jordan Triplett. We've thoroughly enjoyed bringing you the best of the NBA and specifically the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll be back next time to talk more about the NBA and maybe even throw a little bit of NCAA hoops in to talk about ACC action and the North Carolina Tar Heels and the Big Ten, which is having a great year in college basketball. So we'll do an all-purpose type of basketball show next time. Next time you get a chance to hear us. Again, thanks so much. Triple Threat Podcast, Ken Triplett, Jordan Triplett. We'll see you soon.